Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... This weekend, I'm knocking out another book from my extensive TBR, and I'm reviewing the psychological domestic horror novel, Baby Teeth by Zoje Stage, which this thrill ride was recommended to me by the awesome viewer known as Crystal Holtford and the amazing booktuber known as Elizabeth Sagewood. Now, before I get started, I'd like to note that although this was my first time ever reading Stage, I promise it won't be the last because even though I spent the majority of my time pissed at the characters, I absolutely love how quickly I became consumed with the plot and the many conflicts that it presented. Other than that, if you're a mood reader, the perfect time to enjoy this relentless chiller is around the end of April or the beginning of May, especially since a huge turning point in the novel occurs on Walpurgis Night, also known as halfway to Halloween. Also, I would like to add that I buddy read this with my good friend Tammy and my good online friend Hanny. And as we experienced this story together, it was so juicy with drama that we constantly gabbed own about everything that went down. Plus, we could not shut up about how awful these characters were, and because of that, we had a lot of heated discussions, which, don't get me wrong, although it was a lot of fun, there were plenty of times that we all wanted to simply throw the book across the room, but we were too busy hate reading it. So, yeah, obviously, this was a lot of fun, and I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to buddy read it with others. But anywho, before I ramble on too much, I would simply like to thank Hanny and Tammy for reading this with me, and I would like to thank Crystal and Elizabeth for recommending this. And if any of you are watching, I hope you enjoy this review. So, without further ado, let's go visit a family that's so dysfunctional, they would make Mary Hartman's family look like the Brady Bunch. Baby Teeth by Zoje Stage is written in a format that alternates chapters between opposing views, which these chronicle the everyday life of a troubled mother named Suzette and her 7-year-old daughter named Hannah. Throughout this time, it's revealed Hannah is nonverbal and she has an active imagination. And while her being mute is by choice for multiple reasons, among those, she chooses to remain mute so she can defy and manipulate her parents. Which, although Suzette can see through her act, Suzette's husband Alex views Hannah as being nothing more than the perfect little angel who is simply misunderstood by everyone. From here, it's detailed how every day is a never-ending battle between Hannah and Suzette. Yet, upon Hannah discovering Suzette is trying to enroll her in public school, things immediately go from bad to worse because Hannah now believes Suzette is trying to get rid of her so she can have Alex all to herself. In response, Hannah creates this whole fantasy world where she believes she is a reincarnated witch who was burnt at the stake during ancient times. And as her fantasy grows, she comes to believe that her mother is also a witch who has put Alex under a spell. So, with her mind made up, Hannah decides it's now time to cut Suzette out of the picture, which to achieve this, she must kill Suzette. Zoje Stage's debut, Baby Teeth, was published by St. Martin's Press in 2018, and it became an international bestseller. Following its release, it was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award, and it spawned a children's book called My Underslumber Bumblebeast. Then, despite Stage originally not planning a sequel to Baby Teeth, in 2024 she wrote Dear Hannah, which follows Hannah into her adulthood. In an interview for the Pittsburgh City paper composed by Reggie Behe, Stage noted that she considers Hannah to be a child of her heart and she has tremendous empathy for her. Stage's reasoning for this is because Hannah misinterprets many things about the world, which part is due to her youth and being naive, and part of it is that she's really mentally ill. The harder she tries to express herself, the worse her situation gets. In 2019, it was announced that a movie adaptation of Baby Teeth was to be written by Nina Baker. Yet in an interview, Stage said that she's not holding her breath that there will be a movie anytime soon. She elaborated that Baby Teeth's development process resulted in two different screenplays, and they had both been scrapped. Furthermore, Stage explained she didn't see the first script, but they sent her the second script, and the adaptation didn't resemble her novel in any way, as it had a different plot, different characters, and it was completely different in genre. In an interview with Compulsive Reader, Stage said, "My Underslumber Bumblebeast predates Baby Teeth, and this work came about because she wanted to give Hannah a favorite book that her dad could read with her, which, after she considered copyright issues, she decided to create something of her own." In an interview with The Millions, composed by Jessica Hatch, Stage revealed that before Baby Teeth was a novel, she had to figure out how to tell it, and she decided on the dual POV approach, because she felt like had she told the story from just Suzette's perspective, not only would Hannah have seemed less sympathetic, but the one-sided aspect would have derailed some of the sympathy readers have for Suzette too. With that in mind, a great deal of the book's tension comes from seeing how these two characters interpret the same event differently. Due to that structure, it makes people question if one of them is more right than the other. Furthermore, Stage elaborated that Hannah's voice arrived to her fully formed, and she loved writing Hannah's chapters. And because Hannah was nonverbal, Stage tried to consider what things looked like from her perspective. Also, Stage explained Hannah has many reasons for not speaking: an initial dislike of her own voice, a frustration with not being able to say things as richly as the images she sees in her head, and the awareness that it gets her a certain kind of attention. That attention goes back and forth between parental concern and annoyance, but it gives Hannah her own way to feel special. Her mutism became a sort of obsession where, after doing it for so long, she truly doesn't know how to stop. To a certain degree, Hannah knows she'll lose her identity if she begins speaking, and that frightens her. But Hannah experiences words as being inadequate, having found she could never articulate all of her feelings or thoughts. Originally, Baby Teeth began as a screenplay that Stage had written and hoped to direct, and mood was the most important aspect. Her inspirations for this vibe were heavily influenced by European films. Overall, her goal was to have a picturesque domestic environment that became a prison for the mother, who was stuck there. And in the author's opinion, the house is very adult with its appearance, as to indicate that neither Suzette nor Alex ever made room for a child. Fun facts! Here's some things you might not know about Zoje Stage. In an interview for the website Famous Writing Routines, Stage said that while she was born in Pittsburgh and she currently resides there, she did live in Rochester, New York for 13 years. During her teens, she started focusing on theater, writing, directing, acting, and running crew, which contributed to her passion for film and filmmaking. And when mini DVD and cameras became affordable, she made multiple DIY films where she then screened her projects at places like Anthology Film Archives and Two Boots Pioneer Theater in New York City and the Film Kitchen in Pittsburgh. In 2008, Stage won a fellowship in playwriting, screenwriting from the New York Foundation for the Arts, and she was a 2012 Emerging Storytellers Fellow through the Independent Filmmaker Project. Yet in 2009, Stage had a major flare-up of Crohn's disease, and due to her health and finances declining, she ended up on federal disability, and she had to accept that filmmaking wasn't something she could pursue. Then in 2013, when Stage began writing her first novel, she drew on many of the storytelling skills she had learned from being a filmmaker and thespian. She credits her background in film for her visual awareness in her novels. Stage elaborated, "It was tremendously helpful that I came to novel writing having already created full length projects, as I had a sense of the rhythm for telling longer stories. The thought of writing novels was initially very intimidating to me, but when I considered the hats I'd worn as a filmmaker, director, photographer, editor, etc., I realized that a novel required those elements too. It's been a fantastic and rewarding process to create entirely with words." Now that we have that out of the way, it's time to move on to the spoiler segment, which, if you haven't read this book before, I'm about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So if you would like to click away, just scroll down to the comments and you'll see that I have a pinned comment at the top with a timestamp in it. Once you click that timestamp, it will direct you away from the spoiler segment and bring you to the thought segment. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this. So, ready, set, go! Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, I would like to talk about a few moments that made my jaw drop. First up is the collage that Hannah made of Suzette. Now, leading up to this, it was established that Hannah is nonverbal and she hates Suzette because she felt like Suzette had a cruel side to her that she didn't show everyone else, and she believed Suzette wanted to get rid of her by sending her to school. Which it's revealed that Hannah started to believe Suzette wanted her out of the picture when she was around 4 years old, because Suzette had hired a babysitter to care for her one evening while she and Alex went out. As Hannah brooded on this, Suzette had decided that unlike the relationship she had with her own mother, she would be there for Hannah no matter what. And despite Hannah's behavior, Alex continued to see Hannah as nothing more than a misunderstood perfect angel. From here, one day while Hannah pestered Suzette to the point where she lost her cool, Hannah proved she could talk by claiming she wasn't Hannah, but instead she was a reincarnated witch named Marie Anne Dufessant. Come the next morning, while Suzette and Alex were sleeping, Hannah began to work on a collage of old images that she had printed off from Alex's computer. But to gain the centerpiece for her work, she snuck into her parents' bedroom while they were sleeping in the nude. And while they remained undisturbed, Hannah used Alex's phone to take a nude photo of Suzette. Then, upon disturbing Suzette, Hannah whispered into her ear, "My name is Marie Anne Dufessant." And before Suzette could wake Alex up to bring this to his attention, Hannah skipped off with his phone in her hand. Shortly thereafter, Hannah revealed to Alex that she took a picture of Suzette sleeping, and she needed it printed so she could incorporate it into the present that she was working on for Suzette. And despite the fact that Suzette is nude in this image, Alex carried out Hannah's wish and promised to keep her project a secret. Following that, Suzette considered how Sunnyvale is willing to accept Hannah into their school, and despite summer break was only a couple of months away, Suzette claimed that she wanted to enroll Hannah right away so she could become adjusted. But in actuality, Suzette wanted to do this to regain some time to herself, as she could no longer stand being stuck in the same house with Hannah. After that, when Suzette and Hannah were alone in her car, Suzette confessed that she did some research and looked up Marie online. Furthermore, Suzette explained that Marie burnt at the stake with her mother, and they weren't even witches. Then, later upon them meeting with Miss Wade to get Hannah enrolled into school, Hannah barked at Miss Wade until Suzette called her Marie. And upon Miss Wade seeing her behavior, she suggested that they enroll Hannah in Tisdale School, which is a school for children who need special attention. From here, they returned home where Hannah continues to work on her collage for Suzette. And at this point, it reveals Hannah had gone onto a website dedicated to postmortem photography, and she had printed off images of dead people, which she had used these images in her collage, and she placed the nude photo of Suzette in the center as a focal point. Now, although I do hold Hannah responsible for being an absolute little hellion, I really feel Suzette and Alex are equally at fault for letting this happen. Like, for starters, if I had a child, I wouldn't be sleeping naked. Secondly, if I did feel the need to sleep in my birthday suit, I would lock the bedroom door. Also, if I woke up naked to my child taking a picture of me, the first thing I would do would be to grab that phone and delete that shit, regardless if my child was Rosemary's Baby or, in fact, a perfect little angel. Secondly, what kind of absolute moron would print off a nude photo of their spouse for their young child to incorporate into an art project? Like, when I read this, I thought to myself, self? Either Alex really is that naive and stupid, or he and Hannah are trying to drive Suzette insane. And despite whatever the answer was at that time, I wanted to slap the hell out of all three of them because not only did Hannah take a nude of her mom, but Alex printed the picture out for her, and Suzette needed to step up and yank the damn phone out of her daughter's hand before she ran out of the room. So yeah, as you can tell, this all made my blood boil. Granted, Alex later explains to Hannah that he wouldn't have printed off the picture had he known what she was going to do, but still, he shouldn't have printed the damn thing in the first place. Next up is the scene that takes place on Walpurgis Night. So, before this goes down, Suzette introduced Hannah to her potential new school, and once they returned home, Hannah acted out as her alter ego, Marie, where, under this particular circumstance, Hannah writhed about before Suzette in a sexual manner, and she told Suzette that's how she gets her power from the devil. Also, Suzette recalled during her childhood that she had fantasized about killing her own mother, and she wondered if Hannah harbored the same fantasies. From here, after things progressively got worse, Alex attended a therapy session with Suzette where she and the therapist talked to him about everything Hannah had done with her alter ego, which, as expected, he refused to listen. Following that, Hannah began to meditate on how to kill Suzette. She got kicked out of her new school because she instigated harm on another student. And one morning, while Alex was at work, Hannah tried to kill Suzette with a hammer. However, after Suzette was able to get herself to safety, she called Alex to come home. So, upon coming to terms with Hannah having an alter ego, Alex spoke with her and came up with a solution to make Marie go away. And in order to do this, they planned on using Walpurgis Night to banish her, where in this scenario, they decided to burn a drawing of Marie to make her leave. But instead of Hannah following plans, she decided to create a falsified picture of Marie to burn. And she decided to destroy a picture of Suzette with the belief that by destroying that image, it would bring Suzette harm. So, with that in mind, she ripped up Suzette's picture with the intent to throw it into the fire with her fake drawing of Marie. And so no suspicions were raised. Throughout this time, she acted well behaved. Then, fast forwarding to Walpurgis Night, Alex leads the ritual to banish Marie. And during this event, Hannah burns the false image and ripped up picture of Suzette. Following Hannah's action, Suzette trips and falls, which, due to the fall getting her dirty, Alex goes inside to get her a towel so she can wipe herself off. And since there's no time like the present, Hannah uses this as her opportunity to invoke Marie. But before Suzette can properly react, Hannah throws a burning limb from the fire pit on her, and she tries to stab Suzette in the eye with a burning stick, but misses. Then, as this unfolds, Alex realizes there's something wrong, so he runs over and throws Hannah aside. And at first, Hannah thinks Alex is trying to protect her. However, after she landed on her hand, which broke due to the fall, she realizes Alex was trying to protect Suzette. Furthermore, while Hannah sits there crying, she comes to realize that neither parent are paying her any attention. Upon Alex remaining focused on Suzette, Hannah jumps up and down with her hurt hand, trying to get them to look at her. And when Alex runs upstairs to get clothes for Suzette to wear to the hospital, Suzette finally sees Hannah's arm is swollen. In turn, Suzette says, "That's what you get. Hurts, doesn't it?" Then, when Alex returns, Suzette notes that she thinks Hannah's arm is broken. And after he puts an ice pack on Hannah's wrist, Hannah wants him to carry her, but he carries Suzette instead. So, when Suzette responded to Hannah the way she did upon seeing her injury, it made me question everything. In particular, it made me wonder if Suzette did actually have a hidden side that only Hannah could detect. Also, since it was earlier revealed that Suzette had fantasies of killing her own mother, I questioned if Suzette had a whole backstory that we knew nothing about, and what was happening between Hannah and herself was simply a repeated cycle that reflected the relationship she had with her own mother. Which this makes me question exactly how reliable Suzette was as a narrator. Aside from that, I would be lying if I said I wasn't glad Hannah finally got a taste of her own medicine, because despite everything she did to Suzette, she had injured others. And with that in mind, I would like to note that one of her moments that were absolutely unforgivable was how she simply allowed a child with special needs to bash his head against the wall while she simply sat back and enjoyed the show. So, due to that alone, I was pretty happy that she went through the emotions of Suzette becoming Alex's primary focus under this circumstance. Because, as heartless as this might sound, she deserved to have that ego blow. And last is the scene regarding Hannah's phone call, which, before this happens, Suzette, Alex, and Hannah visited her therapist, Dr. Yamamoto. And since Hannah previously bonded with Dr. Yamamoto, Hannah revealed that she believes Suzette had put a spell on Alex and she wants to kill Suzette. From here, Dr. Yamamoto explained to Suzette and Alex that Hannah communicated with her. Adding on to that, Dr. Yamamoto revealed a few years ago she worked with a family who had a violent child, and that child needed to be removed from the household. Which, similar to that case, she believed Hannah needed to be sent to a facility called Marshes to help deal with anger issues and communication. Once there, she would stay for the next 1 to 3 years. In response, Alex said no. However, after Dr. Yamamoto noted there was no other option as Suzette wouldn't be safe otherwise, Alex had his breaking point and he gave in to what had to be done. Meanwhile, although Suzette firmly considered they weren't going to give up on Hannah, she was also giddy that she and Alex would be able to regain their relationship. So, with everything settled, they planned to send Hannah to Marshes, and until that day, they agreed to act normal and like there wasn't a change coming. Well, on the day of Hannah becoming institutionalized, Alex and Suzette told her that they were going out to the country to see horses, which, during their brief window of happiness, Hannah grew to believe that Dr. Yamamoto was her fairy godmother, and she had put a spell on her family so things would now revolve around her. However, when they arrived at Marshes, Hannah immediately hated it because it looked like a school. And while Alex and Suzette spoke with the facility, a woman named Audrey took Hannah to play outside. And as they walked together, Hannah saw her parents' car leaving. Upon having witnessed this, Hannah believed Alex had left her to die with a stranger. Shortly thereafter, Alex and Suzette regained their relationship, and Suzette admitted that she was never cut out to be a mother. Also, she explained she was jealous of the relationship that Hannah and Alex had shared. From here, a month passed, and while Hannah hated living at the Marshes, she came to terms with the fact that not only did she miss Alex, but she also missed Suzette. So, one day, Audrey sees Hannah's upset and she allows her to call home. Upon doing so, Hannah speaks to her parents where she apologizes and explains that she wants to come home. Yet Suzette worries that it's too soon, and if they allow it, she might go back to her old ways. Also, Suzette realizes Hannah is trying to manipulate them, and while Alex almost falls for the act, Suzette explains that they don't deserve to have Hannah messing up their lives. Then she adds that her own mother didn't care if she lived or died, and she won't let her own daughter be her undoing. After that, Suzette whispers to Alex to let her go, where he then tells Hannah that she needs to stay in school. In reply, Hannah promises she won't be bad anymore, and she asks if he misses her. Then, after Alex breaks down, he hands the phone over to Suzette, where Hannah asks Suzette if she loves her. To which Suzette says not enough, then she hangs up. This was perhaps the most heart-stopping phone call I have ever encountered in a story. And even though this all unfolded over the line, the tension was so heavy and stifling, it felt like Hannah and Suzette were standing face to face in a battle to the death. Which, a big contributing factor to this regarded Hannah's last desperate attempt at manipulation. And I say this because Hannah was only verbal when it benefited her. And since Alex had never heard her speak, she likely knew this move was going to be her ace in the hole, despite the fact that she understood if she did speak, it would validate everything that had been said about her. But it was the ultimate gamble that she was willing to take. On top of that, while some might believe Hannah was sincere, I truly felt like she was playing her parents, and had they crumbled under her trick, they would have been welcoming back into their home someone who still had homicidal tendencies. So, because of that, the whole time they were on the phone, I was literally screaming for them not to let her back in. Now, as for Alex, I know this interaction hurt the hell out of him, but had they allowed her to come back, I think about all of the progress that could have been undone, not just for them, but for Hannah. Also, had they allowed Hannah to return, I feel like her wrath would have been much greater than before due to the fact that she was sent away. Which, I say this because after the call concluded, Hannah reasoned that for now, she had to be the perfect girl to get out. And something about her mindset in that moment reminded me of the unreformed inmate who just knows exactly what they have to do in order to be released. In particular, it almost reminded me of the end of Psycho, where Norman had his inner monologue and the mother personality. And to be honest, this delivered a strong sense of dread that I felt worked perfectly with the ending. I would like to take this opportunity to bitch, and for a change, not a single asswipe is safe. First off, I would like to tackle that friggin' bastard Alex. For starters, I'm not a father, nor do I care to ever be one. However, if I was, here's what I wouldn't do. At the top of the list, I sure as shit wouldn't let my hellspawn of a child print off a nude photo of my spouse for some revenge porn art project, then defend the little psychopath like she didn't know any damn better. Also, if my spouse told me that we were raising a child that could make Satan weep, and outside sources were telling me that the little imp was almost as evil as J.K. Rowling, I might just have to say to myself, self, I guess denial ain't just a river in Egypt. Furthermore, I wouldn't contradict my spouse in front of my child. Like, if my spouse said no, I would be like, your dad said no, rather than oppose what he said. And because of him doing that, all the ass did was make it so Rosemary's Baby here thought she was a friggin' Disney princess on my shit don't stink island. Also, I would like to add, Alex was the first character that I've ever encountered where I wished I had 3 hands. Because if so, every time he called the little demon his squirrely girl, I would have choked him, slapped him, and punched him in the raisins all at the same time. Next up, we have that Karen in the making known as Hannah. Now, I don't know what's in store for her in the sequel, but if there were ever an argument to fund Planned Parenthood, it was her. I mean, she set fire at school, she attacked a babysitter, she caused harm to a special needs child, she played parent against parent, tried to kill her mother, and the list continues. And I might not seem like it, but I truly am a peaceful person. However, everybody has their limit, and God forgive me, I wouldn't have been able to help myself, but if I were her mother, I probably would have slam dunked her little garbage pail ass right back into the same dumpster fire from which she came. But with that said, I get Suzette wants to ship Hannah off so she can sleep naked without getting photos taken of her humps. And understandably, she wants to regain time to herself. However, when you have a child, that child becomes your world. And if you aren't willing to sacrifice your entire being to make sure that child is well, then parenting just isn't for you. Which, call me a selfish bastard, but that's why my gay ass has cats. Baby Teeth by Zoje Stage is an intense and infuriating psychological thrill ride that brings a whole new level to domestic horror, where in this scenario, even though the setting is in a modern home, its brooding atmosphere is so claustrophobic and aggressive that it transforms that safe place into a prison. Aside from setting, although some of the characters made poor choices to get us from point A to B, the character development was pretty solid. And it took very little for me to become quickly invested and stay invested. Also, adding on to all of that, this book covered some fairly important topics, such as mental illness, jealousy, parenting, and internet influence. Character wise, I feel like the demographic we're given is much more complicated than just labeling each character as either good or bad. And because it seems like this work explores the imperfections of humanity, it stands as a reminder to how no one is perfect and we are all chaotic and greatly flawed. Now, with Suzette, I feel like she had a constant struggle between right and wrong, where more times than not, she let her flaws get the better of her. And personally, out of all of the characters, I felt more empathy for her than anyone else because it seemed like she had a lot of psychological issues that were never addressed. Which, due to her love hate relationship with Hannah, I wouldn't be surprised if Suzette suffered from borderline personality disorder. For example, although Suzette wanted to make sure Hannah was cared for even during her worst moments, she also had a resentment towards Hannah because Hannah didn't seem to fit into the life that she wanted to build for herself. In turn, this seemed to create an internal conflict where, on one hand, Suzette wanted to be there for Hannah and not give up on her, but on the other hand, she wanted to be rid of her. Also, I wouldn't be surprised if Suzette had postpartum depression, especially since she never wanted a child to begin with. Which, considering that possibility, it really opens up a whole other can of worms, especially when she came to realize that her child had to become her world. As a side note, while we don't have a great deal of backstory on Suzette's mother, I feel like her mother possibly suffered from the same problems as Suzette. That is, if Suzette can be trusted as a narrator. Other than Suzette's flaws as a mother, it's noted how she suffered from severe depression when she was younger, which this was due to her having Crohn's disease. As a matter of fact, her depression was so great, at one point she had been suicidal. But upon Alex coming into her life, he had boosted her confidence and self esteem. In turn, she began to lead a happier and healthier life. So, because of how he changed her for the better, she became dependent on him. Which, for her, this made the relationship he shared with Hannah even more problematic. Moving on to Hannah. I'm gonna play devil's advocate here because while I hated her with a fiery passion, after I finished reading, I put myself in her shoes. And while she might very well be a sociopath, it was her severe abandonment issues that made me feel sorry for her. With that in mind, I feel like a great deal of her negative actions were out of pure desperation so she could simply do nothing more than persevere. For example, she acted out at school so she could be expelled. In turn, being expelled would secure her place at home. Or when she tried to sabotage or kill Suzette, It was to secure her codependent relationship with Alex. Also, Hanny pointed out that Hannah potentially had an Electra complex, which Carl Jung considered this to be a girl's unconscious sexual desire for her father while seeing her mother as a rival. And due to how Hannah viewed Alex and how she treated Suzette, I honestly just couldn't unsee this possibility. Besides the psychological issues Hannah could have potentially had, I found her alter ego to be interesting, which primarily I believe she created this alter ego not only as an outlet to become more vocal, but it allowed her to explore a deeper level of violence and rebellion. Adding on to that, I found it really interesting that she claimed to be a reincarnated witch named Marie Anne Dufessant. Because as we gain a backstory on Marie, we learn that she and her mother had been burned at the stake for witchcraft, although they weren't actually witches. With that in mind, for me, the deaths of Marie and her mother bring up the idea of innocent women being persecuted for being something they're not. And in that sense, I feel like Suzette and Hannah are persecuted by society as well, but in a different way. For example, neither Suzette or Hannah fit into society's expected roles of mother and daughter. And between the two, due to her actions, Hannah receives the greatest form of excommunication from society as she's constantly expelled from multiple schools and she stands as an outsider among the masses. Furthermore, I feel like Suzette is also an outsider from social standards, as she never wanted a child in the first place. And while she does provide for Hannah, she seems to lack a maternal instinct. Also, before I move on, I would like to add that the witch is considered to be the ultimate feminist symbol and an outcast from society. However, what's even more interesting is the fact that Haney pointed out Marie's initials were an acronym for the word MAD, which this could be a reflection of how Hannah feels or a hint of the collective madness that's occurring. And last, there's Alex, which at first I absolutely hated him due to him being so hardcore on ignoring all of Hannah's actions. And no matter how many times Tammy tried to pound into my thick skull that he was nothing more than a person who was simply caught in the middle of chaos, I held firm to the belief that he was just absolutely useless and he needed to become more involved and observant of the issues that were occurring at home. But due to his pride and denial being so deeply seated for the majority of this book, I was incapable of feeling sorry for him. Like, at one point, he was so staunch in defending Hannah, I began to question if he and Hannah were trying to drive Suzette insane, or if his degree of overprotectiveness and coddling was because he had been molesting Hannah and he bowed to her every action as a form of quid pro quo. Yet, I did eventually accept that I was completely wrong in my speculations, because when Alex came to terms with the fact that things were worse than he could have ever imagined and he broke down, his response pulled at my heartstrings. And it did make me realize that he was, in fact, as Tammy pointed out, stuck between a rock and a hard place while two people that he loved was at constant war. And while I've yet to read the unplanned sequel known as Hannah, Tammy and I spoke about how this author could expand out with a prequel and explore Hannah's family tree more. This way, we could gain more in regards to what kind of toxic cycles may have existed throughout Hannah's ancestors. Theme-wise, as far as mental illness is concerned, I feel like this book is a cautionary tale that warns dysfunctional families to seek help before things reach the point of no return. And while this family eventually got help for Hannah, they had a lot of other deeply seated issues that were left unresolved. And since I already elaborated on these issues when I spoke about character development, I'm simply just going to move on. Another topic that this book explores is jealousy, which this is especially seen when it comes down to Suzette and Hannah. For example, on multiple occasions, it's noted that Suzette felt jealous of Alex because not only did he have a better health record than herself, but she was jealous of Alex's sympathy for Hannah. And at one point, she even questioned who Alex would comfort if he had to choose between Hannah and herself. Then, as far as Hannah's concerned, it's obvious she's jealous of any sort of comfort that Alex gives Suzette. And it seems that when Alex comforted Suzette, Hannah's negative actions increased. Yet not all of Hannah's jealousy was directed at Suzette, because at one point it's noted that Hannah is jealous of Marie because Marie speaks, while she decides to remain mute. Aside from them, while Alex was a secondary character, he did admit that he was envious of Suzette's seamless effort to run a house. And while some people might not think jealousy and envy is that bad, those qualities can take a toll on a person's well-being, which can obviously affect relationships. In particular, such as what we see with these characters, it can cause anxiety, depression, hostility, and just having a negative perspective in general. Another subject that comes into play is parenting, which this is essentially the biggest focus of this book. First off, while we don't get a strong background on Suzette and Alex's upbringing, we do know that Suzette grew up fatherless, and considering how she and Hannah view circumstances differently, I have to assume that she and her own mother also had opposing views in regards to interpreting shared events. And while I hate using the word assume, I feel like there are hints throughout where Suzette had fantasized of killing her own mother, such as how Hannah fantasized of killing Suzette. Which this brings into perspective how a parent and child might share the same event, but have completely different interpretations of how that event came about. But getting down to Suzette as a parent. At first, I thought Suzette had unconditional love for Hannah as she showed concern that Hannah be taken care of and helped, even when Hannah was at her worst. However, the ending of this book changed my opinion when Hannah asked, "Don't you love me?" And Suzette answered, "Not enough." So, before I go any further, to me, unconditional love means to love someone without limits or having the expectations of having that same love returned. And I understand Suzette was putting her foot down on Hannah manipulating them any further, but if she truly loved her daughter unconditionally, not enough was the wrong answer to give. Granted, I do feel like Suzette should have remained firm, but by her stating not enough, it really did make me question everything about her character as a parent. Furthermore, no matter how desperately she may have tried to convince herself that she was doing everything she could to help Hannah, at the end of the day, she wanted Hannah out of the house so she could regain personal time and quality time with Alex. And in that regards, by the time I finished this book, I went from believing Suzette was a good mother to believing that she never really truly had Hannah's best interest at hand. Then we have Alex, who progresses from someone in denial to someone who has reached acceptance. Then to someone who finally realizes he needs to act immediately, which I tend to think the majority of his denial is because he felt like he had a child who needed special care. And by society's standards, he would either be seen as an inadequate father or as less of a man for not being able to establish a happy home. And in this regards, I also believe he let his pride get in the way of him being a better father. For example, although he coddled Hannah and showed her unconditional support, his lack of discipline allowed her behavior to become more hostile, as he continued allowing her to practically get away with almost anything. Aside from becoming influenced by that, if Hannah didn't have the free range to surf around online the way that she did, there's a good chance she would have never had the opportunity to print off the images of post-mortem photography that she had used in an art project to anger Suzette. So, parents, moral of the story is, if you aren't utilizing parental controls on your computers or your electronic devices, then you might want to become more observant of your child's internet time and their search history. Overall, Baby Teeth didn't scare me, creep me out, or gross me out. However, I was completely consumed with the characters and the plot that we were given. So, because of that, I had a great deal of fun, even though I spent the majority of this book absolutely pissed. Baby Teeth by Zoje Stage is the type of horror where less is more, because although this work isn't packed with blood and guts or violence, it delivers a constant sense of dread that never lets up. On top of that, I'm confident to say that Stage is well mastered in the fine art of how to piss off her readers. And in that regards, she doesn't miss a single opportunity to infuriate her audience, which for me, this made the complete experience all the more enjoyable. Aside from that, I think the main reason this book impressed me is because this was the first time I had ever read of the bad seed scenario where the circumstance wasn't supernatural and the bad seed lived to see another day. Which, considering Stage has already released a sequel to Baby Teeth, I know for a fact that I'm adding that to my upcoming TBR, as I can't wait to see what kind of hell Hannah brings with her into adulthood. But anywho, at the end of the day, if you want to read a book about a family dynamic that is absolutely relentless on its tension, then I do highly recommend Baby Teeth. Well, I'm sorry that this video has taken so long for me to upload, but as many of you know, I used to work at a very toxic workplace, and now that I'm in a better place, over the last few months, I've just really wanted to relax and kind of go on a hiatus, which that's what I've done for the most part. And of course, that doesn't mean I'm quitting this channel or anything like that. There's quite a few things I'm actually just kind of piddling with and working on here and there. So there is definitely some stuff that's coming up for people who enjoy this channel or my writing. So, anywho, I do hope to have another review up sooner than later. I have also already picked all of the Halloween books that I want to read for this season, so I'm really looking forward to that. And I did actually read another book that scared the hell out of me, so I now have two books for this year that have made it into the top 3 scariest books. And I'm still searching for that third one. And I'm really hoping that between now and January, I'm going to find that third one. But anywho, I really hope y'all enjoyed this review, and of course, be sure to stay tuned to see the contributors who have contributed to my Patreon account. If you would like to contribute to my Patreon or hit me up on social media, links to all of that is available in the description section of this video. So until we see each other again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.